If you can pick up a newspaper and read, you get the full story instead of the little 5-minute or less. Usually it's a few seconds of soundbite about a local story. So by reading the newspaper, you get this much broader perspective on a story. You get all the details, the backstory. And that's something that's missing from the lives of people who have a print impairment. So if they're not able to see or hold or manipulate reading material, they're kind of cut off from society in a lot of ways. And we can think about all the different ways you use your eyes, all the different things you're reading to guide your life and make decisions. What's on sale at the grocery, what roads might be closed if you're heading out to the doctor or you're going out to an event, what events are going on, what about flu vaccines, what about anything. I mean, it's just, there's so much information out there, and we provide that access through 150 volunteers plus. We had 154 volunteers active this last year, and we're providing access to that printed information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's a really cool thing, and it could not possibly happen without the support from the library, the support from donations from our community, and definitely the volunteers who come and read for us, which you did, and you did a great job.
Oh, well,
which we would expect.
My anchor life kicked in. But I was reading with a couple of pros. In fact, I took a couple of pictures while I was there, and I read with Diana Keebler and Bill Henry. Bill has been reading for, he's been volunteering for 6 years, and Diana for 1 year. She has this soothing voice, and she read Dear Abby. We were reading the News Sentinel when I was there, and and they read obituaries, and we read sports. I had to say, okay, how do you write, how do you read this? Bill was wonderful. They were both wonderful. And sometimes you do have volunteers to come in to read with the volunteers, just like one-time volunteers. And it was amazingly informative and educational. Plus, as a volunteer, and I talked to Bill and Diana about this, they are much more aware now of what's going on, because they just can't read what they want to read. They read what they think the listeners want to read. In fact, how are things chosen?
Well, we train the readers, because what we do is really different from any other kind of media service. We're not offering our opinion or giving people extra outside knowledge that we possess. We're simply making it available to them, accessible to them. So we're reading verbatim. We want to read with good, emphasis and the appropriate inflection, but we don't want to prejudice what we're reading, so they don't comment on it, and we don't tell them what to read, because eventually it would become my news story. If I picked every news story, it would reflect my sensibilities. With 150 volunteers picking stories based on our guidelines that we want them to choose local stories first and move on, state, region, nation, then it's going to be much more free of any kind of bias. The only bias it's going to have is the original writer that wrote that article, whether it's magazines or newspapers.
We also read editorials, and I mentioned the person who wrote it at the beginning and then also at the end, because my goodness, the adjective, that's what you have in editorials. In regular news, it's objective, like he said. Editorials might say he claimed. And so as I read that at the end, I also said who wrote it again.
Exactly. And it helps the reader. Sometimes the volunteers are a little nervous about reading things that are different from their own political, religious points of view, and that tends to be more of what you find in letters to the editor. So they get a little nervous about that when they haven't read with us yet. And so what we tell them is, well, number one, there's this little paragraph we read that distances ourselves. These aren't our opinions, they're the opinions of the editorial board, or they're the opinions of the letter writer. And like you experienced, you read the person's name, Tom Jones writes this letter, and you read the letter, that was a letter from Tom Jones. And you pause and you move on to the next letter, and our listeners know that it's not our opinion or lack of opinion, it's simply making it available to them.